All right, howdy, howdy. So we're going to move on a little bit into our next chapter, which handles parasitism. And one thing to keep in mind, what it actually means. So para, by the way, is a word root that means sort of hanging off the side, just close by or on the edge or near. So parameters, paralegals, uh, paraprofessionals and all that stuff. That's what that's from. And then sit or site is a word root that means food. So all this means is you're getting your food by hanging off the side, and that's what parasites are. Going back probably into your biology or living earth classes, in terms of relationships between two different species, there are a couple possibilities you can have there. Mutualism is when you have two species interacting and both species benefit. For example, in your gut, you have many species of bacteria. You give them a happy, delicious place to live, and they help you digest food and all that. So that's what's going on there. Commensalism is notice I've got the +0 relationship there. So that's where one benefits, but then the other one is like, who cares? It isn't harmed and it isn't helped. And so one example, if you wanted to look up this on your own, is eyelash mites, mites, and you could do a little Google image search. It's kind of a trip. They live among our eyelashes and eyebrows and things, and those little hair follicles are little habitats for these small arachnids. They don't harm us. They don't help us. They're just there, so who cares? So kind of a trip. You'll want to scratch your eyes out after doing some some image searches online and everything, but whatever, no big deal. They're not harmful, so who cares, right? This chapter that we're going to be focusing on is the third type of symbiosis, and that, of course, is parasitism, and that is where one species benefits, but another species is harmed. And the one that is harmed is referred to as the host. That's the one that is providing the food for these other organisms that are living on their body and such. So, okay. So, in terms of what parasites eat, first we could go ahead and talk about the blood eaters. And there are two different types of ways you can get blood into your insect body there. The first, what's considered selenophages, those tap into blood vessels and drink directly from the blood. They basically drill in or inject their mouth parts and then just drink. Usually those are they've got chemicals in their saliva that are going to make it less painful, and you might even not notice when a mosquito is drinking your blood. So that's a selenophage. Telmophages, those are painful. I have been bitten by those in, it was in New Zealand like 15 years ago, and we were at a beach, and those things, you just sit there and ow, and then your arm starts hurting, and, you feel all these painful bites, and then you're bleeding in lots of little places on your arms, and all the flies are attracted to that, and they just rip off a chunk of skin, and then as your blood pools up, they drink from it. So the way I remember the difference between these two is just the first letter of each word. So selenophages, they kind of drink through a straw, for example. And telmophage, they tear off your skin and drink from that. So there we go. Fun. Okay, and one of the other things, I guess this slide just kind of randomly popped in here, out of order, but who cares? If you are living, so I want you to kind of get into the mindset of being a parasite. Um, and if you're going to survive on your host, you have to make sure to not be picked off and all that stuff. So if you're an ectoparasite and you're living on the outside of an organism, uh, and you're traveling through fur or feathers or whatever, it's really a good idea to not be like spherical shaped, but and instead make sure to be flattened. You could be laterally compressed, which means flattened side to side, or you could be dorsoventrally flattened. That would be squishy or squished from top to bottom. Wingless, and you don't want big old antennae or anything that's going to get stuck as you're crawling through fur or feathers. You're going to have a lot of claws and hooks and pokey stuff that are going to prevent you from being picked away. If you're living inside of a host, generally you're going to be kind of squishy because you have to kind of hang through and muscle contractions and live under the skin. You still have to breathe, so you're breathing through your abdomen out the little hole in your host. You also do not want legs or antennae or wings. So this is where Diptera and the true flies are really good at being parasites. If you notice at the bottom of this slide, bot fly removal, there are some pretty nasty videos on YouTube. I'm not going to consume your time here, but you may want to check that out. It is kind of graphic, but these are some super nasty flies, and they grow really large. And so that's what's going on there. Okay, moving along. Back to diets, I guess. So there could be mucus-eating insects. And so mucophagy is kind of the process of that. Histo means cells or tissues, and so histophagus. I need some caffeine going on here, or maybe I've had too much caffeine. I don't know. Anyway, so you could have parasites that eat skin and body tissues and things like that. And then another thing to keep in mind is polyhemophagous insects. These wind up, they can jump from host to host, and they don't care what they're eating, or what species they are consuming or being a parasite on. So you could hop from a squirrel to a rat to a cat to a human, and then over to a dog, and then back to a chicken. Those would be parasites that are polyhemophagous. So. Okay, cool. Probably a pretty easy one to keep in mind here is endoparasites versus ectoparasites. So endo is living inside, and ecto, it means outside. So ectoparasites, like in the right-hand picture there, those are bird lice. So, okay, I do want to talk about a couple of the major parasite orders. So we have our true flies, and you'll find bot flies, mosquitoes, there's black flies, there's all kinds of these. There's another weird word, it's called KEDS, K-E-D-S, that I know that sounds like a tennis shoe company from the 1970s and 80s. I don't even know if they still make those, but anyway, if you look up sheep KED, K-E-D, you'll find some flies that have reduced wings, and anyway, they're ectoparasites. Anoplura are the sucking lice. Those are the mammal lice, so human head lice, human pubic lice, all of those. And then Malophaga are chewing lice. Those are generally restricted to birds. And by the way, kind of a funky cool word here is this fly in this picture is in the family Hippobosidae. And just looking at the word roots there, it just means horse, cow. And so these guys obviously are large mammal parasites going on there. So, and of course, fleas. We cannot forget fleas. These are most closely related to the true flies. They've lost their wings completely. And if you'll notice all these spikes, these hairs on their bodies, that helps them lodge into hair really well. There are many, many species of fleas, and they parasitize a whole lot of different animals on this planet. So, okay, just a little focus on two of the common mosquitoes you may see around here. Anopheles is a pretty nasty one. It's responsible for transmitting the disease that causes malaria. And then Culex is another mosquito species, and that transmits a lot. Now keep in mind, I know humans hate mosquitoes primarily because of disease and of course the itch from a mosquito bite. But mosquitoes are actually, and I think I've mentioned this before, they're pollinators. The males do not drink blood. It's only the females that drink blood right before laying eggs, because they want their kids to come out super healthy and everything. So anyway, moving on. Bed bugs. So these are Hemiptera, so they've got a beak. You can see in the bottom left there are some really short wing pads, but the wing pads don't cover the abdomen. You can see all these little slices, individual segments of the abdomen. So the wing pads are pretty short. There's the beak right up the middle. And you can see in that top right picture, yeah, if you've been attacked by bed bugs, sometimes there's some irritation, but they do not transmit disease or anything like that. They're just a real pain to have around. Hotels don't like them. Movie theaters don't like them. All that good stuff. So, okay, well, this gets kind of gross here. There's a word that I wanted to teach you here, and it's myiasis. MYI is a word root that means flies. So this is an infestation by members of the order Diptera, basically having maggots in there. Yes, if you look in the bottom left, you'll see the rear ends of a couple of maggots. Maybe there's one more up by those front teeth. So yeah, they can live in you're probably sitting here going like, I am never opening my mouth again. Yeah, so flies take care of this opportunity when they are when you're sleeping and all that good stuff. So here's some animal leg. Maybe it's a cat or something like that with a live infestation there and someone's heel. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring this up is, even though this looks super gross, the trip here is that maggots and myiasis are sometimes used in medical procedures where they actually help clean open wounds. So if someone has gangrene or they've got part of their body tissues are dying off, in some places, some doctors will go ahead and prescribe maggots, and the maggots will eat only the dead tissue. They will not eat any living tissue, and so that helps oxygenate and cleanse and remove any of the rotting yuck that's in there. So yeah, kind of a trip. So it's not all bad, but sure, that would be kind of gross to have to experience. Now, there's also social parasitism that goes on, and so this is not, sucking blood or eating skin off of a host or anything like that. But kleptoparasitism is stealing, and ants are really good at, some ant species. I'm not saying all ants, but some of them will find other insects or other species of ants and, beat them up and steal their food and all that. And then there actually are some examples of dulcosis in ant species where ants will take other species of ants and force them into slavery. Usually this happens, examples I've seen in some videos and things are the honeypot ants. which are kind of a trip. And I'll try to find a link here for you that you could kind of see that. So, okay, another little bit here is what our book is going to talk about is host specificity. And what this means is if you are tied to like only one species as your host, and you're a parasite that will only parasitize one species, you have a very high degree of host specificity. And the downside with that is if your host doesn't live in large colonies, or if your host dies, let's say you're some parasite that lives only on polar bears, and that's it. You're like, nope, I'm only going to live on polar bears. If your polar bear dies, you have to now go find another polar bear. And that could be really hard to find because they don't hang out in big groups. And so, if the next polar bear is 35 miles away and you're half an inch long, chances are you're going to die with that polar bear. Okay. However, and the opposite end, if you have a very low degree of host specificity, that means you don't care. I don't care if it's a dog or a rat or a human or a chicken or whatever. I can drink blood from any of those. This would be a generalist rather than being very specific. A generalist is way more adaptable. It's like, who cares? If it's got warm blood, I'll go ahead and eat it. So, okay, and I believe this is the last slide here. And this is a couple of different types of parasitism going on. Facultative means that, well, hey, the opportunity arose. Sure, I will, be a parasite temporarily. Okay. And they don't require it for their survival, but it's just, it's just, if it's there, sure, they'll go for it. Obligate, an obligation means that it's required. So if you're an obligate parasite, that means you have to be attached to this parasite, attached to the host, and your own life depends on it. Your species depends completely on that host. So that's kind of a tough situation to be in, but there are very many, there are a lot of obligate parasites. And then there are intermittent parasites, and that means they, every once in a while they will need a host, so they can grab some supplemental nutrition and things like that. So I think that